Imagine having the opportunity to legally represent the rights of animals in court as a public official, having access to all case files, questioning witnesses, instituting appeals, ensuring that the animal's interests are protected. Antoine Goetschel did this for 3 years for the Canton of Zurich. In that period, he handled approximately 150 to 200 cases per year, giving the animals a voice in legal proceedings. Not only has he been at the coalface of animal cruelty, since 1984 he specialised in legal implications of human-animal relationships in Swiss and international law, completed a doctorate in 1989 on animal welfare law and fundamental rights, established and shaped the Foundation for the Animal in the Law, an organisation that researches and consults on the relationship between humans and animals in the law. He was instrumental in drafting animal welfare legislation in Switzerland, and he fought successfully for the dignity of living beings to be protected by the Swiss Constitution. He has written more than 50 scientific contributions, essays and legal opinions on Swiss cantonal and national, German, Austrian, European and worldwide animal-related legislation. He has addressed a number of organisations on animal law, including the German Judges Academy and the European Biomedical Research Association, and is a visiting lecturer for animal law at Zurich University. Antoine has been heralded by British media as the world's top animal lawyer, and in 2005 was awarded the Margaret and Francis Fleetman Prize for tireless and outstanding commitment to contemporary animal welfare legislation, especially for pioneer work for the animal in the law. It is Voiceless's absolute pleasure to have Antoine present the keynote lecture for this year's lecture series. Please everybody welcome Antoine Goetschel.
Thank you very much, Brian Sherman, Ruth, Jean Sherman, Voiceless team. Voiceless, you feel it, is an organization with warm-hearted people and cold-minded personalities. And we need this conjunction, this mixture in our daily work when we treat animal cases. Voiceless, a key word that followed myself when I started with working on animals, because I was not allowed to speak for 10 days when I was about 24 years old because of an accident, and I felt it quite uncommon. I like to speak, lawyers like to speak, and I realized it's only 1 or 2 sentences a day that are really important. The rest is just chatting. And I wrote them down. But parallel, I wrote books and articles on the mistreatment or the treatment of cows, of chicken. And I realized how cynical it is to say they can do everything they want, except, for example, a chicken to spread its wings. And I felt how strange it is to deprive humans, to deprive animals, to do what they are, what is in their own repertoire in the ethological behavior. So to give animals a voice started within myself in the 80s, and I was so happy to see when I was first in contact with Voiceless long time ago, to see that this Voiceless is the logo and the heart of this very, very great movement in Australia. Congratulations. Thank you very much for inviting me and being here. Within the next about 40 minutes, we will go through the following matters. One is, above all, why do animals matter at all? Why should it be something that we should discuss? Maybe I will not have to convince you, but it might be the one or other argument therein when you are asked by your friends why animals and why not only banking or tax law or whatsoever. And it's never the money reason for doing animal welfare law. Ethics versus law is a field that we have to think of when speaking of, for example, animal rights. Are we speaking on the ethical level of animal rights or on a legal level of ethical rights? Not to wear fur. Is it an ethical issue or is it a legal issue? Let's try to train our mindset in the discussion what is the difference between ethics and law. I tried to go with you through a kind of roadmap for the animal in the law. What could Australia do for an even better position of the animal in Australian legislation? I then will bring in some results that we worked out in Switzerland. And let me calm you, the problems about animals worldwide are all the same. The problems are all the same, but the solutions are different. And instead of just focusing on one legislation because you're in Australia, does not forbid to open your eyes, your heart, to say, hey, what happens in other parts of the world? What solution to the problems that we have did they find? And maybe it might be effective and efficient to look at what other legislations worked out. Because Voiceless, I'm intrigued by the question why animals should have to give a voice, and I will explain to you what I did, what we created that worked very well for 19 or 20 years in the canton of Zurich to give animals a voice, but formally in every criminal procedure in the canton of Zurich. Something that could easily taken over by New South Wales. I will show you how and why. How to give animals a voice is more a technical thing. What did we make as experience dealing with law professors, with block-minded policemen, with farmers, etc. Maybe it will shorten the time for doing the same in Australia, New South Wales, and the summary at the end so that we'll not lose the track. So, isn't that just cute? I love that. I would love to touch the nose. Okay. Why animals matter? You see it, it opens our heart. We feel them to be part of society. We know they are part of society. No society without animals. This is not only about especially males that if you say animal welfare, I'm interested in animal welfare law, then he says, don't take my steak away. It's not only that, animals as an important producer of meat, eggs, leather, milk, etc., etc. So without that, society would differ completely. It's also about what we feel, that animals are no objects. They are animals. This is why this feeling of the society is so important and why it's important to bring it into legislation. Society feels that their cat, their dog, their horse is not an object. They give names, as in the Bible it's written, God gives names to the animals. So it is a close bond, a human-animal bond, and if we say that animals do matter in society, then, and if we do say that they are no objects, we changed this in Switzerland, in Germany, in Austria, in Poland, they are not treated as objects, then we should also give up the idea of categorizing animals. Why should, for example, a cow be treated, legally speaking, as an object? Also a cow, a pig, a chicken, and also mice used for experimentation are no objects. So animals are felt not to be objects and do play an important role in society. And Mahatma Gandhi said that our way of treating animals in society is the most important parameter to see how humane a society is. So do not overstep the importance of animals in society. Having given several interviews now also this morning on radios about meat eating, so I do not eat meat, do not eat fish for about 20 or 30 years on a personal level, but I cannot impose my personal opinion to the majority of the society. I have to admit that I like the way of living to say yes to the product, the things that I eat, the things that I wear, and to say yes to the production. Most of us, 95% of the population, says yes to the product, meat, leather, fur, also medication, you know. When you go out, you have a headache, you just take a pill, and you take into account that, of course, for producing these pills, animals have been used, be it mice, rats, rabbit, dogs, sheep, transgenic animals also. And if you just take it, you say yes to the product, otherwise you wouldn't take it, and you don't want to know more about the production. I think it makes life more consistent that if you are surrounded by things like meat or clothes or whatsoever, it makes life more consistent to say, I consume that, I buy that, I use that, and I can stand behind it, and it makes, I do not have to close my eyes, to close my soul, to lie on myself about the production method. This is, Mark Bechthoff has other aspects of why animals matter. I don't like numbers so much. There was just a math lecture before, and it was plenty of numbers. I said, oh gosh, I hope that I got the right presentation here. I don't like numbers so much. I'm not so much interested in cage sizes, in statistics. They are important, but I'd like to give the idea of why animals do matter and why animal legislation is key for society. Ethic versus law, you will tell to yourself when you are a law student, this is a question that takes half a year of lecture series. It's a very important difference to make. I can only give you a glimpse as far on the practical level. It's very important to see the difference, and there are hundreds of other differences. Why is this ethic versus law question so important? First, because ethics as the science of how humans should think, should act, should react in a good way or in a bad way, what is non-ethical, this science, also on the personal level, these feelings are a source for a good legislation. And a legislation that has no ethics, that is just ethic-free, that is only about optimizing your money, is not the legislation that a society needs. A good legislation is about equity, about fairness, and a good legislation is always minded towards the ethics to say, maybe not now, maybe not in 5 years, but maybe in 30 years, the role of women in society. I don't want to open the question too much about Aboriginal people and so on, but it gives the direction of fairness. ethics as a source for legal request is key. On the other hand, it's also a personal opinion. What do you think? What do your friends think about this or that issue? And it's never binding. So if you have the impression that the society is ripe, that time has come, that what we think is society, like cage eggs or stalls, should be banned, then it's, first of all, an ethical point of view that it's not correct to behave like that and to say yes to these housing conditions. But we need a majority in Parliament, and before that, a majority in society to say yes to a new step ahead. When we make laws, then it's not as strict, it's more liberal and more animal unfriendly than our personal thinking should be as far as ethics is concerned, but at least it's in the law, and it should be, it is meant to be enforced against those animal users that we do think to abuse their position as animal owners. So when we discuss animals issues, we always have to think the question, is it an ethical point of view? For example, we should not eat meat, we should not wear fur, we should this and that. Is it ethical, or is it a legal point of view? If legal, just open the legislation and look, is it forbidden, is it not forbidden, is it banned, or is it a case in legislation? And by that, you avoid endless discussions in with politicians, with farmers, etc., to see that discuss the issue about the law. If we do think we get a majority in steps ahead in favor of the animals, then we have the ethics behind us, and we can make laws with the goal that they are that will be enforced. Otherwise, we can change laws and make them into wishing lists, as birthday wishing lists. I wish that farmers, I wish that pet owners, that puppy breeders are kind to their animals. If it's not enforced, then just replace it through a wishing list. For that, we need majorities in public and parliaments. This is key for knowing when is the time ripe, when has the time come for next steps ahead in favor of the animal. This is why Voiceless, other animal welfare law groups are so much interested in preparing legislation far ahead. So when an issue comes up, you and we are ready to bring proposals in. We know that politicians, sometimes there is like a trademark for a watch that says, the slogan says, don't crack under pressure. If the public opinion now, for example, speaks about the export of animals and it's cruel to look at it, it's hurting our soul to look at those pictures, then do something, they do something, legislation then comes out, we are not satisfied by it, we should be in favor of the animal, long-time thinkers, in a way that we are always prepared when an issue comes up to find a majority. Now it's not, now, for example, to bring animals in Australian constitution. People say, you will never get there, it's impossible. But as Che Guevara said, be realistic and ask for the impossible. Roadmap for the animal in the law could be that we look around, or you look around in Australia, and I show you in other parts of the world how what has been done, and I do not see any reason why Australia should not be able to make major steps ahead, especially when the government says that Australia is far ahead and leading as far as animal welfare legislation is concerned. This is great and you always can do better. And if you compare this legislation to other spots in the world, you will see that maybe you think it's a little bit of a fairy tale. We go through. An important issue is to bring animals in the Constitution. Why? Because property on animals, to make business with animals, to make research on the back of animals, this is all a fundamental human right. They are humans. We are entitled to have dogs as property, as, if we can afford it, I don't know what is more expensive, a dog or a car, but it's a fundamental right to have property in our system that is meant to be kind of capitalistic. It's a fundamental right. The question is less for me, my personal point of view, should we change the property thinking, yes or not? I do not see an alternative for the moment because we replace it like a childhood, a custody or so, maybe in 7, in 12, in 20 years, I don't know. For the moment, we have to get aware that the use of animal is, after all, a fundamental right. The question is, how can we restrict these fundamental human rights for the good purpose of animals? We only, this is how it works in Germany, in Switzerland, in Austria, we only can find the balance between the fundamental human rights and the animal's interest in their protection of dignity and against suffering by bringing this into balance, in bringing animals in the Constitution. Otherwise, the ace at the end of the day of a criminal procedure is always, this is my fundamental right, I can do with my animals whatever I want. And if the Constitution says you have another ace, I do not play poker, probably the picture is completely wrong. You will tell me at the beer afterwards. But it then gets in balance. Without it, you will always lose. Not only animal welfare should be protected by the Constitution. Animal welfare in a traditional way of thinking, like Jeremy Bentham wrote in 1780, why should we protect animals? And he said, because they can suffer. Yes, of course, they can suffer. Also, fish can suffer, or at least have stress. They are vertebrates, they can suffer. This is okay, and it should be enforced everywhere, also in Australia. This is great, but it's an old-fashioned way of looking at it. We changed Swiss Constitution in 1992. I asked for it in my legal thesis, and it passed, saying that the animal's dignity should be protected. What does it mean? It means that we look at animals with a dignity similar, not identical, but similar to the human dignity. We feel it. This dog or this charming rabbit before has something that is much more than another living creature in another body. It has something that has an inner value, an inherent value, as, for example, the Dutch Animal Welfare Act has, or the term of the dignity of creature has been taken over by South Korea in 2008. So the dignity of creature gives a perspective that animals should be looked at as more that only to be protected against suffering. So, and if changing the Constitution, why not just also taking over the term of the dignity? It works very well in Switzerland. Why was it so intriguing for me to stand up for the dignity of creature? There was a discussion about transgenic animals in Switzerland, and a professor, a well-known, high-ranked professor in Basel, produced a fly he was very proud of with 12 eyes. With 12 eyes. Fabulous, he said, because by that, with this bio box, we know exactly when the cell turns into this and this form and produces then a life form with 12 eyes, so it's important knowledge. And I said, I felt it's kind of wrong. But animal welfare legislation only focuses on vertebrates and not on non-vertebrates. Non-vertebrates make about 95% of the species worldwide. So this is kind of unfair. This is one reason why animal welfare organizations were not allowed to speak about this fly. And the other was Jeremy Bentham, by saying, we have to protect animals because they can suffer. How can I prove that this fly suffers, yes or no? And they say, prove me. If you cannot prove it, just leave the room. I felt, you would say, voiceless, kind of helpless with this issue. And finally, in '92, we changed the Constitution with the dignity of living beings. And now the Swiss Animal Welfare Act of 2005, 2008, enacted, takes over this term, gives a definition, and it works quite well. For example, having no kids around, having sex with animals, this happens, statistically speaking, it's about 4 to 8% of the population that practices it, they say. I'm vegetarian, I do not do it. But I love animals, and then I always think, yes, and what? Where does it stop? So sex with animals, for example, is, for my point of view, it's an infliction of the dignity of animals. Animals are not there as an object of our sexual fantasies. With children, it's obvious that it's a don't. And we had now a specific ban, so in those cases, I had not to prove that animals were suffering. It was only a fact, and then he got punished. I would say we had good experience made by uniforming animal welfare acts. In Switzerland, for example, we had Uniform Welfare Act since '78. And before was the big discussion, is it weakening if we uniform it, or is it strengthening? It's strengthening. So if, for example, in Australia, you would uniform all these animal welfare acts, because I worked through page by page the Animal Welfare Bible of Australia, the first issue and not the second, that will come out in June or something. It's always the same question, and then you have these countries and territories. It's incredibly difficult to find out, am I really correct that in Tasmania, in New South Wales, in WA, etc., it's this way. Just, I think we made good experience also on the European level to uniform it. If it's uniform, the weakest will strengthen, the strongest will about stay the same, but if you enforce the law, then you can really compare, is Tasmania stronger than New South Wales? And Australians love sports. So why not put that on a competitive basis? This is impossible if it's not uniform. So take it on a sporty way. Animals, we do not feel animals to be objects. This is why Germany, Austria, 88, Germany, 90, and I worked on a project for 12 years, from 89 to 2003, to change also the legal status of animals in Switzerland, and it's now far in front of Germany and Austria. But this notion that animals are no objects any longer has been taken over, for example, by Poland and by France in Europe. This gives the society good feeling, because what they feel is protected by the legislator. If you go to court with a client for example, that was not able to go to work for 1 or 2 days because she was forced to go with the cat to the hospital, or when the cat died, she was very sad and was not able to come to work. And the judge said, hey, but it's an object. Why do you making such a drama out of it? This person feels offended in her feelings. So by changing that, a lot of several other aspects have been involved. I cannot go into details, but I see a good chance to change civil law to say it's not an object. It's a third category. There are humans, animals, and objects. Why not here? If people make laws, it's us that make laws. We send our people or your people, we have politicians here, so this is why I'm so very polite with them. We send them to do a good job in the local or in the federal parliament. They should think that what they are working out will be implemented. This is otherwise just a wishing list. There is a saying about that comes into my mind as far as this Australian government to say we have the strongest animal welfare framework worldwide. This is what they say everywhere. It's a fairy tale everywhere, and people believe it because they believe in the government. It's easy. It's a lobbying thing, you know? Just do it, and like sheep, we believe in it. Or look, I don't know how sheep think, but they look like, yes. So, if you are making legislation, make sure that it is enforced. Otherwise, just do a wishing list. So it needs effective structures in law making and effective structures in law applying. This animal welfare lawyer in the canton of Zurich worked very well. Why a voice for animals and why the animals should get an advocate by their own? I speak of advocate by their own or attorney by their own, not because, Ruth said it, we have now a production, in a positive way, a production of animal attorneys. This is fabulous. I speak of what do they do afterwards. It's too sad if you write your doctorate, your work on animal welfare, and then you end in, what shall I say, banks is great, I'm coming from Switzerland, but tax law or something is kind of boring, although it would be very interesting to fight for animals also in tax laws. It's obscene that, no, it's great that art is, for example, tax exempted, but animals are not. So we see that if we look at the framework as far as animals are concerned in a broad way, it's a lot to do. I said nothing against tax attorneys. But when I speak of animal advocates, I see them placed within and with a certain freedom in mind within the system to stand up for the animals in criminal cases or in cases that go through the administrations as far as permits, etc. is concerned. Who does stand up for them? The public prosecutor should. Is he motivated? Has he been beaten by a dog? Does not like dogs so much? So these are all questions I was confronted with because I knew them, I spoke with them, I worked out catalogs with them, and this is not written, but we feel it is this person open-minded and open-hearted, or between a murderer and the drug stuff. Now it's just a dog's case. Where is the motivation? If no one stands up for the animal in the law, then it's kind of, let's go through it. It's like doing homework. May I ask the students, if I would say, read this book until page 250, it will not be a test. then, but you do it for your own. The first 2 or 3 times you do it, and afterwards you say, it's not controlled, nobody can say something against it, I will not read it, I'd rather go for a beer or something else, for boogie boarding. If it's not, if it's not controlled, if no one stands up for the animals, why should you do a good work? You should because it's ethics. It's ethically important. But the law says if you just disclose a case and you do not go into details, then it's okay because nobody stands up. Why is it important? Because we have a classical conflict of interest. The most cases I had in the canton of Zurich within these 3 years, about 180 per year I had, beside being a normal lawyer. I worked as the animals advocate in the canton of Zurich. And the most animal abuse cases are, of course, made by the animal's owner. The animal's owner will do the best not to be punished. He will go to the worst, so the worst unlikely and unloved attorney to get free. And it's exactly the animal's owner that should protect the animal. If we leave the animal's interest protection only to the prosecutor or to the lower court, it does not work. It does not work. Statistically, we collect in Switzerland within the Foundation for the Animal in the Law every court case of the last 20 years. It's 9,500 cases on the internet with a very refined framework, so you easily can find what is a fine if you decapitate your dog in the canton of Zurich or in the canton of Geneva. It's all there. With this statistical basis, we see that where there's no voice for the animals, it does not work or not easily work, and if they have a voice, it works. This conflict of interest can be resolved by an animal welfare attorney. What happened is, when I started, no, not I was number 3. I had it for 3 years, and we created that institution in 91. In 91, we thought, I was also there involved, but I did not take it over of political reasons, because they would have said he created his own seat. We don't like that. This is why we took the best one then, and it was the first prosecutor of the canton of Zurich that took over this function, so one really of the high society. He took it over, and we counted, and we have foreseen about 20 cases a year. About 20. And what happened is we ended up at about 180. And it is not because we had more animal cruelty, but it's because the law enforcement has increased tremendously. What we also did is, by this collection of all the cases in Switzerland, I remember that the canton of Zurich is only a canton, so a sub-country of Switzerland. We have 26 cantons, and we collected them all. And by that we could, with the confidence of the government who gave it to us, with this Foundation for the Animal in the Law, we could exactly prove that the law is not enforced in the canton of Bern. It is half enforced in the canton of Uri or canton of Geneva. And every year we went out and said, we count the cases, we look at the height of the fines, and we could compare on a scientific basis. And they liked numbers, I'm not. So they did the number work. We could exactly say, this works. The journalists stood up and said, hey, canton of Lucerne, why are you sleeping? And then suddenly the next year or 2 years later, it increased, it doubled, or we had the triple number of cases because of the public view. Needs objectivity. Just fix it when it's broken. If something works well, say, great, it works. And be helpful to the judges to say, oh, you have such a case. we print out 15 cases we had, similar cases, and the fine would be about, traditionally speaking, about 3,000 francs or dollars, and we think that the culpability of this case must be at no lower than 5,000. What happened also that because they were kind of controlled in the canton of Zurich, the policemen, the judges, the politicians had a motivation that increased. I had open doors. I could go to the first state attorney of the canton of Zurich in my new role. He said, "Thank you," and not, "What are you doing here?" He invited me and said, "Can we not work out a framework of the fines to make the work of the prosecutors under him more easily?" So this is confidence on the legal side, and it shows to the society that if someone plays this role, they can trust in the government, they can trust in legislators to take this animal issue seriously. This is why on different levels this animals advocate is so important. It gives animals a face. I was then quite often in the newspapers, and it was not because of mine. I want to show that I went to the hairdresser just recently. It was that journalists knew whom to ask, and I was then independent. I did not work for the Foundation for the Animal in the Law. I did get the funding. It was not high, on an hourly basis, quite low. It would have been nice. Why should it be low paid? It should be the way that if you sell ethics, it should be at least the same amount as if you sell not ethics, but this is another discussion. But I was not paid by the animal welfare organizations, so I was independent, and I fixed what has to be fixed, what is broken, and the rest I could leave to the prosecutors and to judges to make their job. And by that, I had a certain objectivity, and the medias liked that very much, because if you're working in the name of an animal welfare organization, then often they look the statutes, they look the website and see, oh, he has to fight for this case and he's not independent. So to give animals a voice and a face, in our time, the public relations specialists in the room know exactly that it's important that someone gives a face. It's, from my point of view, a realistic result of the animal rights debate, because I do not see for the next 7 years really clear results to find a majority in the parliament, in the society, to give animals rights, as long as we do not exactly know in the majority what they do consist. It's a great debate. I just said I look forward to, I want to be part of the solution and not of the problem. It strengthens the public awareness for animal matters, as I explained. So, how to give animals a voice is we should be able to show the level of law enforcement. Is it high or is it low? If it's low, then it's needed. If it's high, then it works. We have to be objective on that, not only collecting the scandalous cases where the suffering is huge and the fine is low. We have to be objective and scientific, and Voiceless is doing that very, very well. We have to create a database, or we did so in Switzerland, complete and objective, bring, as we are, as Voiceless does it here, as we started in the 1994, animal law to universities and win students. Great that you are here, and great that it's full. Thank you very much. Creative, innovative projects, and take over just as a thinking model, the Zurich model of the animals advocate as a starting point. So, as a summary, I would say, from the human point of view, animals do matter. They belong to society, and we should no longer close hearts and mind to what happens behind the doors. It's us to decide if we want it or no. We should go from the, it's important to be against cruelty. Nobody in the room, nobody in other law classes would say, yes, we are for or pro-cruelty. Everyone is anti-cruelty. This is obvious, but we should make a mind shift from the anti-cruelty thinking, also in campaigning, everyone is against it, but to a pro-dignity. It gives far more subtle discussions and debates on the question, when is the dignity inflicted and when not. I do think to change the legal status of animals, that they are no longer objects, that they are not treated as chattel, but that they have their own category in civil law, makes the society, gives the society with good reasons warm feeling towards their own legislation. Give animals a voice in procedures shows that lawmakers, politicians, policemen, judges, prosecutors are taking this matter seriously, and you will see in 7 or in 12 years that it works, and you will have it in written. And I ask myself, why, as I'm quite sure, traffic law is enforced, anti-drug law, as smart as the drug dealers are, is enforced, and why is there a reason about discussing the question if animal law should be enforced, yes or not? By that, based on the Mahatma Gandhi thinking, it makes society more parallel, human-friendly and animal-friendly. This is my point of view as a human being, and I think from the point of view of a, how do you say, a non-human vertebrate, just to give animals a voice in New South Wales legislation, that would be fabulous. I want to thank you very much for your attention.